You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody, a little after 2 o'clock here in the upper Midwest. And boy, I am so lucky to be joined today by Michael Tomasky, who's the editor-in-chief of the New Republic. And he is as thoughtful today as he was before the election delivered shocks to our collective cerebellum. Michael, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me. It's nice of you to say. I should tell everybody that I got this election wrong.
Yeah, you and everybody else. So
you do sometimes. Well, not everybody, but anyway, a lot of us. But there you are. Just thought I should admit it.
Yeah, I got it wrong too. Can I start in an unusual place? And maybe I'm skipping a couple of steps, but this election, proved that right-wing propaganda, certainly not the mainstream media, but what right-wing propaganda is the dominant force in shaping America's perceptions. I think it's a social force as much as it is a disinformation source. But that means, among other things, that the burden, I guess, as well as the opportunity for the New Republic and other truth tellers just got vastly larger. So how are you thinking about this?
Yes. Well, first of all, I agree with you, unsurprisingly, and I wrote a piece to this effect a couple weeks ago, and it's probably the most read piece I've written in my 3+ years, nearly 4 years at the New Republic. And I've done a lot of shows to talk about it, and I said essentially what you just said, that I've been watching the right-wing media grow from a few talk radio hosts in the early 1990s to what it is today, which is not just Fox News. When we say right-wing media, we think of Fox News. But people should understand there are other cable networks. There's One American News. There's Newsmax. There's Sinclair, a vast network of radio and local television stations, and to some extent newspapers. There's a vast network of right-wing talk radio stations, a couple of large networks of Christian talk radio stations, and then on top of that, there's all the podcasts and TikTokers and YouTubers where the right is generally ahead of the left, and more people get their news from those sources these days than they do from traditional media sources. So we crossed a Rubicon, Edwin, in this election. This is the first election in American history where the right-wing media was bigger and more influential than the mainstream media. And people really need to understand that. Now, were people voting on inflation? Of course they were. And were they voting on, to some extent, the border and some other issues? Sure, of course they were. If the conversation is about voters' motivations, nobody goes into the booth thinking, oh, my thinking has been so influenced by the right-wing media that I guess I'll vote for Trump. That's not the argument. But the argument is that is the broader context in which we Americans receive our information, and it really colors absolutely everything. So it's a dangerous point. It's an opportunity for a place like the New Republic, I guess. It is, and we'll do our best to seize it. But it's a real problem for our society and our democracy.
It isn't just that they have now more voices, louder voices, but they control the technology that they control the algorithms for who gets to see what. And that is, there used to be laws that said that one company couldn't own, both major newspapers in a city. How quaint. Yeah. How old-fashioned, right? Yeah. But instead, Elon Musk can now say, I'm going to buy MSNBC and add it to my propaganda network.
Yeah. And that is a particularly chilling thought. happen. But it's indicative of another point that I made in this piece that I wrote a couple weeks ago, which is, don't think that because they're now at parity or slightly above parity, that these right-wing forces will be happy with that. No, they want complete domination. Victor Orban spoke to the CPAC conference 2 years ago, and he said the most important thing, have your own media. It's what we need to combat, the leftist propaganda. And this has been a project of rich people on the right for many, many, many years. And rich people on the left haven't been paying attention. And so we are where we are. And I can foresee a time in 10 or 15 years in this country where in about 75 or 80% of it, nobody's even exposed to, forget liberal media, just mainstream media.
Well, I mean, when you say that, what I hear is the thing that people are exposed to is government propaganda, one-party propaganda. And that is terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's not just terrifying in terms of our democracy, it's terrifying in terms of our society, because America is so vibrant in its play of ideas. And if ideas now, if we adopt an orthodoxy and enforce it through all of our media, we just lose that thing that has so benefited us in every imaginable field of creativity and science and technology, in economics, as well as in government.
It's so true. And so, we'll see. I mean, you mentioned all these other realms. We'll see what sort of assault on science this incoming Trump administration launches. So it's not just a question of their policies per se. It's a question of a tone that is set and that asserts itself in many different aspects of American life.
I'm tempted to talk to you about some of the policies they have on offer. But before I go there, I just want to, the incoming administration is already, I think, on track to be the most corrupt we've ever had. They've already not signed the things they need to sign to make sure there are no conflicts of interest. They don't want to sign it. They are rejoicing in conflicting interests. Elon Musk somehow being the largest one of the largest military contractors and being in charge of what the government spends is an enormous self-dealing conflict of interest that you usually see in oligarch countries. And that should just be the biggest warning flag of all.
Well, it should be, but they do so much along these lines, and it's so overwhelming that you just can't keep up. You just can't keep up, and you can't prioritize where your outrage should go. Pam Bondi, she's qualified on paper in the sense that Matt Gaetz was not, but she withdrew an investigation into Trump University after Trump donated $25,000 to a PAC that helped her. No charges were ever pressed. It was looked into, and no charges were pressed. But that's really not the bar we ought to be going for here for the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. She dropped an investigation after getting a political donation. That in a more, as you say, quaint time, that would have been a huge controversy. As I wrote yesterday, today it's jaywalking.
Yeah, well, it isn't. And I'm not, no. You and I can keep raising it and reminding everyone that we all lose when we get rid of these guardrails. I mean, I wonder how investors are going to feel when Trump's friends get a sneak peek at the monthly jobs numbers before the rest of the country does and can invest accordingly. right? I mean, all
Right.
of this stuff goes to destroying the systems that we put in place that have allowed many of Trump's supporters to make the money they made.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the way, he has smashed these norms, the way he smashed them in late 2016 and early 2017 by not putting his the businesses in a blind trust and by, setting up this system, however he managed to set it up, where all these supplicants from the Gulf states and all these other places had to come stay at his hotel. Mm-hmm. Boy, that's something that has this is small potatoes in the scheme of things, but that Waldorf Astoria, which used to be the Trump Hotel, is kind of a nice place to get a drink in Washington. I hope it doesn't go back to being a Trump hotel.
Well, so the biggest line of defense should be the rule of law. The rule of law is in the hands of a Supreme Court that says the 14th Amendment does not apply to the potential insurrection of Donald Trump. The Emoluments Clause doesn't really exist. The shortest article in the Bill of Rights, which is, I think, 14 words about the right to bear arms, the first 8 words about it having something to do with a well-regulated militia don't exist. So, I mean, we are mistaken if we think some of the biggest institutions that are there to protect the rule of law will do so.
I'm afraid you're right. I mean, the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, I have a feeling, is going to loom awfully large over these next 4 years, right? I mean, there's this law called the Insurrection Act, which I know you know, and I'm sure many of your listeners know, and it dates to the 18th century, and it's vaguely written, and there's amendment piled on amendment, and, it's never really been tested in the sense that we've never had a president who has said, I am invoking the Insurrection Act to go arrest X people, okay? We've never had a president who has said that. Now we have a president who's completely capable of doing that, and I would expect will do that. It could be to arrest you, or it could be to shut down the New York Times. And I have to assume that the Supreme Court will say, well, it was an official act, so he has immunity from prosecution. He can do it.
They were tested. They agreed he'd have the right to send SEAL 16 to kill somebody.
Right.
This is right. They're so we have to. I mean, I expect that Donald Trump will do things that cross lines and Americans won't go there. I think I know people who voted for Donald Trump who are not MAGA. They bought some of the propaganda. They don't really remember what he did when he was here 4 years ago. They don't remember his handling of COVID. They sort of think he was unappealing, but, for whatever reason, they were more comfortable with him. But I don't think that they voted for, and, he barely won, the kind of chaos he's about to bring us.
Yeah, I don't either. I know a couple such people, too. And they've always been the most mysterious to me. I understand MAGA heads, actually. I mean, obviously, I don't agree with their view of the world. But sure, I can understand why some people find that cocktail that he's serving up to be tasty. I have a little more trouble understanding the people in the middle who don't see him as a unique figure, either threat or in alluring terms. You know what I mean? At least people like you and I and the MAGA people at least have in common that we recognize Trump's uniqueness.
That's right.
Then there are these people in the middle for whom he's kind of just another politician, a little more so. But, he's no different, really. They don't think of him as sui generis or unique from who Joe Biden is or Barack Obama or Mitt Romney is. It's sort of blows my mind. But I've been trying to think about that a lot.
Yeah, it's an unthinkable thought. And you can think it and I can think it because we spend so much time studying this.
Yeah.
And these other guys have the luxury, really, of thinking about other things. And thank God they do. I mean, who would get to go to a movie if everybody spent all their time doing what you and I do, right? Who would write the movies?
Exactly.
Who would write the books?
Yeah.
Who would, I mean, it turns out people do other things, but they really, in something as important as this, you kind of want them to check in a little more. I mean, the two biggest private prison companies saw an 80% gain in their share price in the week after the election. This is in anticipation of building a Trump gulag system throughout America, right? Yeah. And in no way, when that happens, are Americans going to rejoice. Oh, you're trying to cut the government, but you're spending billions on an internal prison system? I don't see that computing with anybody.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, it will compute with his backers, but these voters that we're talking about in the middle who decided to vote for him for the reasons you described a couple minutes ago, I think that will. I hope that will surprise them and chagrin them and make them think twice.
Yeah, like the shooting of those little girls in a Baptist church did 50 years ago. Yeah. I think it will.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, we did see, it was kind of darkly amusing that searches for "can I change my vote," spiked in the days after the election.
Oh, wait, Project 2025 is a real thing? I thought they said it wasn't. Yeah.
Right.
How about killing the Department of Education? I mean, Title I funding for low-income students zeroed out, I guess. Data collection and analysis, so we know whether students are doing better or worse, gone. Student loans, who knows how that's going to work. And, I know they think, Pell Grants, that's just like for poor black kids. And it is, but most of them are poor white kids. So, again, it's like, you talk government all you want. I mean, I don't get Obamacare. I'm on the ACA.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's been an unbelievable one, too.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Are Americans going to be comfortable with the end, of a fight against climate change?
Well, that's a longer-term thing, that people or maybe don't recognize so much. But we know that car companies are telling the administration, don't shift us away from EVs. We've invested billions of dollars in this technology. We're down that road, and we all want to keep heading down that road. And so I think even if they don't hear from Americans, I think they'll hear from private enterprise that, the greening of the economy is a good and potentially profitable thing, in addition to being, environmentally good.
So you're raising something that I've thought about, but I can't yet get my head around. You can help me. And it is the paradox that Donald Trump has created for himself. His own voters mostly don't believe him. They took his talk of like dictatorship and locking up his adversaries and deporting, millions as more signaling than actually policy statements. And Trump might even know this. But the folks he's now bringing into his government, they are deadly serious about implementing it. Because he said, I'm not ready. He's outsourcing his administration to the Heritage Foundation like he outsourced the judiciary to the Federalist Society. So he's stuck now. Either he lets down this base that actually wants him to do these awful things, or he does them and the great majority of Americans revolt. Either way, he's a lame duck who's going to fail fast, I think.
Yeah, well, it is true that he's a lame duck, and that's something that I hadn't given the proper consideration to before. But that's going to be an interesting aspect of all this when he can't run for president, and that Vance is supposed to be his heir apparent. What's that going to? I mean, the rumor one hears, you may have heard this, maybe I shouldn't be trafficking in rumors on radio, but I don't know. Vance Don Jr. in 2028.
Okay,
I mean,
I'm just starting to feel bad on that. That is no help.
Sorry. Like I said, it's just a rumor. Who knows?
Right. Like his daughter-in-law is going to be the senator from Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
banana republic at large.
Yeah. Well, it's not impossible. Anyway, there's going to be a certain amount of tension maybe between Trump, who wants to do all these things and get them done because that's his agenda, and Vance, who is going to be thinking more about 2028.
Yeah.
That might be.
What do you think of so Mitch McConnell, is still pretty savvy and dangerous, and he took the chairmanship of the Rules Committee. Again, paradoxically, I was delighted, because that seems to say to me that he is not about to let the prerogative of the Senate be completely undermined by an autocrat who wants no other sources of power in the country. How did you read that?
Yeah, the same way, I guess. The Senate Rules Committee isn't, in general, as powerful as the House Rules Committee, but it's powerful enough, and he knows the rules. He knows what strings to pull, and I think you're probably right about that. And the rejection of Gates showed that maybe there's some occasional backbone among the Republicans in the Senate.
Well, but here, again, this is where guys like you beat that right-wing propaganda machine and helped put a lot of pressure on. On Fox, they didn't talk about anything wrong with Gates. They love him,
right?
Plastic surgery and all. They think he's a great guy.
Yeah.
But we beat him in part because we stopped, navel gazing and went out and said, look, this man should not have this job. He's unfit for it. And I think Pam Bondi is going to be, you guys wrote about this. She should have a very, very significant vetting in a hearing. Even if the Republicans pass her, they're going to pay a price for passing her.
Yeah, this was a really good piece by my colleague Greg Sargent that appeared yesterday, maybe this morning.
This morning, I think. I saw it this morning. I thought it was great.
Just this morning. Yeah, thanks. Where he said, look, Democrats may not be able to block Pam Bondi from being confirmed, but they can take her confirmation hearings and lay down some very serious markers about things that they're going to keep an eye on her about, and they should do that with all these people. These hearings will be, of course, next year, next February and March, so they have plenty of time to prepare and plenty of time to know what to make the public aware of about these folks.
And Michael, the fact that there will actually be hearings, when again Trump demanded that it all be recess appointments and there would be no hearings, is another defeat for Mr. Trump and his efforts to start his time in office with no one willing to hold him to account to anything.
Right. Yep. So maybe all is not lost, but boy, it's going to be
I think that it's going to be a dangerous time, and people are going to get hurt. I think with great reporting, and you guys do great reporting, and everybody, as I've told you before, please get the New Republic. You need to know what's going on in order to have this fight. We need to protect the institutions of the democracy, and we need to protect the civil society from the there's an adjective I'm looking for to describe this propaganda. It's this faux nativist, faux patriotic propaganda that says it has the backs of workers when it really is just sitting on those backs. you guys write about this with clarity and smart, and people just need to know that's how we're going to win.
That's right. And I heard the tail end of your guest before me, who was a little bit more upbeat than I have been. So I'm going to try to end on that note. 2 years is a long time, and he can do a lot of damage. But looked at another way, it's not that far away. History suggests that the Democrats should pick up 27 seats. That's the average since post-World War II era, I think. So, the Democrats should have a reasonable shot at taking back the House of Representatives. Then their presidential candidates will start running around, and they have good ones. We all, I think, regret that we didn't have a real primary this year with Gretchen Whitmer and Josh Shapiro and whoever else. But we'll have that next time, and we'll see. I mean, as devastating as the election was, it was close, and the Democrats don't need to quote unquote win the working class. They need to claw back a certain percentage of the working class. This Black and Latino shift, particularly among men, is very disturbing. Is it sui generis to Trump, or is it a historical trend? We don't know that yet. And the Democrats have some thinking and soul searching to do about that, for sure. But it's not like this was 1984. This wasn't some landslide. It's just not remotely like that.
Yep.
By which I'm not. That's not an Orwell reference. That's a literal reference to the 1984.
Yes, to a year. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That's how I took it. Yeah. All right. Well, Michael, thank you as always for your wisdom and your work and the time you spend with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, likewise, and I'll come on anytime, as you know. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.